Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. So in the last video what we discussed was how to create WebSockets on AWS API Gateway and a quick demo of how we can actually implement it. So in this video we are going to talk about some of the important metrics that we need to look into for the API Gateway WebSockets, and also some of the limits that are imposed by the API Gateway. But before we get in, let me do a quick recap of what we have discussed in the last video, so that you can easily connect to some of the other items that I'm gonna talk about in this video. So let's go back to AWS here. So as you can see, we have the API Gateway, and these are all the various routes that we have. Connect route, disconnect, join is to actually join to a channel. So think of it like a Slack. Okay, so if you guys have used Slack or any other messaging platform, basically, so you join a channel, your friend also joins a channel, and then when you publish a message, it's like you're chatting with your friend, right? So when you publish a message, the message would be posted to your friend, and vice versa. When your friend posts a message, you will receive it because both of you have joined this particular channel. So in our case, so this is how we define our action, or this is how we select our route key. And the connect route is actually a Lambda proxy, which is talking to the connect Lambda. For now, I did not implement disconnect route. Join route calls the join channel Lambda, and the publish route calls the publish Lambda, right? And then we have the default route. Just to see a quick recap of how this works. So let me kill this and then start a new connection here. So now you're connected, right? So after you connect, what you're doing next is you're trying to join a channel, right? As you can see, action is join. So why did we give the action as join? That is because you see request.body.action. So this action needs join. So when this matches, the join channel Lambda would be invoked. So now this user has joined the channel called test. Now in another tab, we have another user who is already connected to the to the same test channel, right? Now let's see what happens if this guy posts a message. So in order to post a message, what we need to do is, again, action needs to be publish. So why is it publish? Now go back here. We have a publish route. So if a user calls the publish route, publish Lambda would be invoked, and then this Lambda will actually send your data to all the users who are connected to that particular channel. So now when this guy sends publish here, so it would work something like this. Like, he would see this guy received a message called hi, and then even this guy received another message called hi. So just to change the message, just say hello, and then you post it. So even this guy receiving, we can suppress this, so we can only send it to the other users in the group, but I did not do that just for the sake of this demo. So as you can see, this user received a hello as well. So this is how WebSockets work. So you open a channel between two users and they can communicate with one another over that WebSocket channel, right? So this is a quick recap of what we did in our last video. So going back to the presentation here again. So in this video, we are going to talk about some of the important metrics and limits for the API Gateway WebSockets. Okay. So first, let's talk about the metrics. So what are some of the important metrics that we need to look into? So these are the ones: the connection count, message count, integration errors, execution errors, and client errors. So where can you see these metrics? If you go back to the API gateway here, and then if you go to the dashboard, you should see all the metrics in here. So let's go through one by one. So what is connection count here? So if you want a detail or a description of it, so AWS documentation has it. So basically connect count is nothing but the number of messages sent to the connect route integration. So what this means is that how many requests did this route actually receive? So if we go back to our example here, if this user has sent, so when you type this command here to connect to the WebSocket API Gateway WebSocket, this is considered as 1 and the connect count is increased by 1. Similarly, if another user connects to it, the connect count would be then 2. So it basically tells how many requests have you received in a given time interval. So what you need to be careful is that with API Gateway WebSockets, you cannot really tell at a given point of time how many users are actually connected. Unfortunately, AWS doesn't provide that metric. It would have been really helpful because with whatever metrics that we have currently or what you see on this board, you cannot tell how many users are connected. You can only tell how many users have connected in a given time interval. That's all you can tell. In this minute or in this second, how many users have connected. That's all this connect count metric tells you. Okay. And now the message count. So what is message count here? So once after a user connects to a WebSocket channel, then he actually starts posting messages, right? As you can see, user has posted a message here and he posted another message here. So every message that the user posts is actually a message. It comes under the message count. So that is this other metric here. So I mean, as you can imagine, usually the message count would be way higher than the connection count, because once the users are connected, they start talking over the WebSocket channel. So the message count is usually higher than the connection count. Next one is the integration latency. So what is integration latency? This is the time difference between API Gateway sending the request to the integration, in our case it is the Lambda, and API Gateway receiving the response from the integration. So what this means is how much time did the Lambda take to respond back and for the API Gateway to receive that response. So the overall latency. Next metric, in this case, if you see it is, for example, I think here it says 3000 milliseconds. So basically it's 3 seconds. Next one is the execution errors. So what are execution errors? So errors that occurred when calling the integration. In this case, you're trying to call a Lambda, but for some reason it failed. So that will be counted as execution errors. Next one is integration error. Integration errors is the number of requests that return a 400 or a 500 response from the integration. This means when you call a Lambda function, and if your Lambda function returns a 400 or a 500, maybe because you sent in a bad data, you would get back a 400 from the Lambda, for example. Or there is some error, maybe it failed to talk to DynamoDB or some other data store, and then it threw a 500, your Lambda threw a 500. So all those would get translated as your integration errors. And client errors is nothing but the number of requests that have a 400 response returned by API Gateway itself, even before the integration is invoked. To be honest, I haven't really run into the client error, but my guess would be there is something wrong with your input payload in itself. So I think if something like that were to happen, then I think you would get a client error instead. So these are some of the important metrics that you need to monitor, especially the the ones. There's one more thing, so let me explain that as well, and then I'll come back to this again. So when you look into your API gateway here, and then you click on stage, so you would see there is some default throttling that has been set. Your current account level throttling is 10,000 messages per second with a burst of 5,000 messages. So what is really this messages per second? So if you look into the AWS documentation, you cannot find this anywhere. This is not mentioned anywhere, like what is messages per second. But what this actually means is that it is nothing but a request per second. That is basically your message count per second plus your connection count per second. The overall is the request per second or messages per second. So that is the default limit that they have set, which is 10,000. For a production environment, usually this is really less. So when you're rolling out your WebSockets into production, what I recommend is estimate your usage and then work with AWS support to bump this limit. So depending on your usage patterns, I think AWS support can easily increase this limit for you. So to understand this better, in this case, let's say the message count is 60 or 120 per second, okay, or 100 per second, and your connection count is, let's say, 10 per second. So your overall messages per second is 100 per second plus 10 per second, which is 110 per second basically. So that's how it's roughly, that is what it would translate to, the sum of these two in a second. So you have to be really careful, because if you forget to bump this metric in production, and if your traffic increases, then as you can see, it would start throttling automatically. So how does throttling work basically? So I'll share this link as well. So as you can see here, since 10,000 is the limit, if a caller submits 10,000 requests in 1 second period evenly, for example 10 requests every millisecond, then API Gateway will process everything. But if some caller sends 10,000 requests in first millisecond itself, then what would API Gateway do? It would serve 5,000 of those requests. What is this 5,000? Where is this coming from, right? So that is the burst capacity. So that means all of a sudden, if 5,000 messages come in, that is the maximum that it can process. Anything about 5,000, it would throttle all of them. So whenever you see the request being throttled, right, I think API Gateway will give you back a 429 too many request error. So in your client code, you should possibly, you would probably notice this 429 appearing, too many requests. So you can go through this document in detail to understand the API Gateway limits. But the important point, as I said, is estimate your usage and then leave some buffer on how many messages that you might want to process. For example, let's say you're expecting your messages to be maybe 50,000 messages, right? Then you would talk to AWS and then you would set the limit at, say, maybe 75,000 messages per second or something like that. So that is one important metric that you need to consider. You would not find much documentation around this metric. And the other thing, the interesting thing is, when you first roll out your API Gateway to production, my recommendation is you enable the CloudWatch logs and then you put it in info mode, and then you log the full message data, and you also enable access logging. So you can define your own log destination here. So why I recommend putting it in info mode is because this will give you a detailed logging message on when was the connection established and why was the connection, so what are all the messages exchanged and why was it disconnected, so on and so forth. So in case if you see any issues on your if your client sees any issues, then you can easily check your logs. If you put it in error mode, it won't really log much information for you to debug. It's from my experience, it's not really helpful, the error logging at this point. So till you feel comfortable with your code in production, I would say keep it in info mode, and once you figure out all your issues and errors, then go back to error, because if you leave it in info mode, it's gonna cost you a ton of money just for the CloudWatch logs in itself. So definitely look into the CloudWatch logs when you first roll out. The reason why this is important is, let's say your WebSocket connection was closed for whatever reason, right? So now you need to find out why was it closed. Did the client close it? Did the server close it? Because if your client closes the connection, I think there is something called a disconnect status code which gets logged into the CloudWatch. So that would be -1 if the client has closed it. But if the server has closed the connection, I think it would be something else. I think it's 1001, or I guess it is 1001. So these codes really tell you who closed the connection. And if you see any issues, you would have to reach out to the AWS support, and then you would want to present them with these logs saying, hey, these are the logs that I see and these are the disconnect status codes. So when you provide them with those logs, then they can really help you out in figuring out if you're running into any issues, right? So yeah, I think that's pretty much about the API gateway metrics and limits that you want to look into. So bump up your requests per second or the messages per second limit depending on your usage, and also keep a close eye on your logs to see if you're running into any issues after you roll out your WebSockets. And I think the other important item is, so if you ever notice any issues with the Lambdas, right? For example, in this case, our integration is Lambda, and for whatever reason, maybe you hit limits with your Lambda. So all those Lambda throttling, they would get translated into, I think, execution errors for you, because you're not able to call the integration, right? Because Lambda started throttling because you sent too many messages. So that would get translated into execution errors. So my recommendation is to put some sort of alerting mechanism on, like a CloudWatch alert on all the various errors, so that whenever you run into issue like Lambda being throttled or something else, or maybe your Lambda has issues talking to your backend data store or whatever, then you would get errors, and then you would be alerted based on those errors. And another alert that I would recommend is a custom metric, which you might want to, or at least something that would alert the message count in itself. So if you have something on the message count, then whenever you're reaching that default limit or your account limit provided by AWS, then you will be notified, and then you can proactively bump up the limit. So that is, and just to recap another important item, this is not related to metrics, but I want to point this out because this is really critical. So with your API gateway, once you establish a WebSocket connection, right? Let's say you don't send any messages, you just connect it. So what do you think would happen? So what would happen is, if your connection is idle for, I think, a maximum of 10 minutes, API gateway will automatically disconnect that WebSocket connection. So in order to keep your connection for, and the maximum duration that a WebSocket connection can be open with API gateway is, I think, 2 hours. So if you want to keep your connection open for a maximum of 2 hours, then what I would recommend is, let the clients send a ping message like for every 10 seconds or 15 seconds continuously to the server. So it would be something like this. It would be action ping, and then it doesn't have to be any message. Just send a message to the API gateway, and then let the API gateway respond back with some dummy message like say hi, right? So when you keep this pings going in from client to server and server back to the client, your connection will not be idle and it won't be disconnected by API gateway. And it's not just API gateway which can disconnect the connection here. So even on the client side itself, if let's say if there are some firewalls configured, so even they can disconnect a WebSocket connection if they notice that connection is idle for a few seconds. So you have to keep a close eye or monitor your clients and see what would be the best possible interval to set that pings going in from client to server. Maybe it is 10 seconds or maybe it is 30 seconds. So that is something that is really important to keep your WebSocket connection alive, so that your connections are not dropped frequently and then reconnecting back again. So yeah, that is my last point, guys. That is all I have for this video. In the next video, we are going to talk about what are some of the limitations for the Lambda function with respect to API gateway. This is also really critical because any issues with Lambdas, they would get translated or they would be pushed up to the API gateway WebSockets as well. So in the next video, we'll look into the Lambda limits and also some of the best practices that you can follow when you're working with API Gateway WebSockets. All right. So that's all I have. Hope you guys like this video. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. And if you like the video, please do share, subscribe. All right. Thank you very much.